Those are scary, Mel.
Hey, Mel. Thanks very much. They're good at what they do, right? They're good at what they do.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
You're good at what you do. You had a chance to sit down with the director of this doc about Michael Jordan. And I started watching it this weekend, and it's fascinating.
Right? And so, I mean, we lived it back then, obviously, 97, 98 seasons, what they're talking about. This is called The Last Dance. It was called The Last Dance for a reason. At the beginning of the season, the general manager and the ownership said that their head coach, Phil Jackson, would not return. They were not going to renew his contract. So they knew this before they started the season, which is really weird to do to a team. And Jordan said he would only play for Phil Jackson. So this, again, is real life, so we know there's no spoilers. We know what happens during this season, which after the end of the season, Jordan retires again. But this was The Last Dance. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, a cast of characters in this. The director, Jason Hare, we chatted late last week about this. There's over 500 hours of footage. So they let a camera crew cover this this season for them. This is the first time this was ever done. NBA Entertainment at the time was headed up by Adam Silver, who is the current commissioner of the NBA now, and this was also, the footage was done by Klay Thompson's uncle, Andy Thompson, at the time as well. So we'll chat with Jason Hare, and this is him kind of talking about the whole, the setup for this and growing up with the inspiration of Michael Jordan. How intimidated were you, and how did that go, that first meeting?
For a better part of 4 decades, to have someone live in your mind as this two-dimensional figure, and then to have them be three-dimensional in front of you and interacting with you, it certainly takes your brain 5 or 10 minutes to wrap itself around the fact that this is a living, breathing human being. But it's a credit to him that he's charismatic enough and he's empathetic enough. He knows what it's like for someone to meet him. We didn't know if he was going to leave after a half hour. I didn't know if I would ask the wrong question and he'd say, I don't want to do this anymore. So there was a lot of pressure to make sure we got what we needed out of him. So he made it easy, though. It's a credit to him, and we were off and running from there.
And Raj, the reputation of Michael Jordan is that he is intimidating. He is, there's no beating around the bush with him. He'll tell it like it is, and he will be intense about it.
But you know what I love, though, in that one, I forget which one it was, but where he starts crying when he wins the championship. Was that episode 2?
Yeah, it's episode 2.
And he shows that human side, right? He's an interesting character. He's complex.
He's very complex. There's so many layers to the story, too. And this is not just for basketball fans, And so the one thing Jason said that he had to do was balance it for a generation that wasn't old enough or even born then to see what happened and what this season was all about, to witness it live, and then still with the generation that did see it and keep them interested because they're like, well, we know this, right? So how do we juggle that? How do we balance that? And he does a great job because this is told basically over the span of 10 episodes, as we mentioned, but a month each episode. But then they still go back in time to talk about how you got to this point, which is really cool. And then the 90s nostalgia that's in it as well, with the music and the soundtrack and the outfits and all that on top of it, which is great. And one person...
Yeah, the long jackets.
Yeah, right, and the baggy
jackets,
suits.
They were wearing this.
Right? And one person who was all about fashion and was way ahead of his time and a bit of a misunderstood character, Dennis Rodman. Now, people know this name, not just in basketball, but in the fashion world. People talk, it's synonymous with Kim Jong-un because he's spent time with him. He dated Madonna, dated Carmen Electra, so he was in the pop kind of culture world as well. And Jason said that it was pretty interesting interviewing Dennis Rodman. Sitting down with Dennis Rodman, we know he's a character. What was that like for you, and if you could describe it the best you can?
I've never interviewed Dennis before. I've never come across him. Of course, I knew him, and I saw the trajectory of his career, both on and off the court, from the late 80s, because I was a Celtics fan, and those bad boy Pistons were the most hated team of my youth. So Dennis was, he's the guy that I used to pretend I was playing against in my backyard. There were so many different kinds of personalities to examine and to try and to see what made them tick. And I don't know if there's a more fascinating person to find out what makes him tick than Dennis Rodman. He's kind of the clown prince of that team. You had Batman, you had Robin, and then you had the Joker. I think that Dennis is misunderstood. I think that all that the piercings and the tattoos and all that and the glasses, it's all armor. This is a guy who ultimately just wants to be loved, wants to be wanted, wants to be needed and accepted. And he found that with that team. He found the niche that the role that he could play and the niche that he fit into. That's why he kind of went off the deep end when Scotty came back, because he had found this guy, Michael, as a hero of his.
So good. So on Netflix Canada today, episodes 5 and 6 come out. It's a 10-part docuseries, The Last Dance, featuring the Chicago Bulls of the 97-98 season, and of course, starring Michael Jordan. Over 8 hours of interview footage is what he got with MJ, which is unheard of. And MJ ultimately got the sign-off still. He still has veto power, and they still haven't finished, Roger, episodes 9 and 10. They were just finishing that because they did have to bump it up because of the pandemic as well.
And I guess you don't want to rush it because it took, 20 years to convince Jordan to say yes to this.
Yeah, pretty much.
Beautiful.
So.
All right,
it's amazing, yeah.